Hello, welcome, Cabbage here. So let's start a new series where we translate the 4-panel comics that appeared on the official account on Twitter. These appeared on both the JP and global accounts, but for whatever reason, 8 of them were never translated, so I can do those. As we go, I can attempt to explain the visual language of Japanese comics and Japanese humor, which are sometimes different from Western standards. If there's a ton of interest in this series, I can also look at the existing translations and talk about how I would do certain translations differently and why. But first, let's do this Sarafa F66x comic. This one is pretty straightforward. The title I would translate as The Worry of the Day, talking about clients with worries coming to Sarafa as the fortune teller to have their futures read. The narrator first says the fortune teller is again listening to the worries of lost little lambs. The choice of lamb here to describe her clients reinforces Sarafa's notion of control over them. She asks, "What is your worry today?" F66 answers, "Well, I am too in love with my husband." Sarafa says, "Huh?" which is quite a rude, blunt way to reply. It's like dismissive and disbelieving, like surprised that anyone would 1. Have this issue, and 2. That they would consider it an issue. But F66X in the past we have seen, especially in the dramatic recital linked below, that she can get a mania, tunnel vision outlook on things. And then what does F66X say the rest of the comic? It doesn't matter. There is meaning, of course. She gushes over 063Y's looks, his voice, his rough hands, his gentle way of treating her, but what matters is that she goes on and on, in her own world, lost to everything around her. It's an important theme in her and 063Y stories, but here, taken to a humorous extreme. Sarafa's answer in the 3rd panel, she says, "I'm gonna leave." Sets up a dummy of herself, funny that she even has that, but also thematically related to her own story. And then she sneaks away. There is that word there, sorori, which signifies her sneaking away. This word is interesting to note because there are a lot of these automatopoeias in Japanese that have no direct counterpart in English, so it would translate as like sneaking or quietly, which is pretty awkward. Anyone who's seen translated manga before has probably seen the awkwardness of these. I feel like in American comics at least, this idea would be more represented in a pose, like Sarafa getting away on tiptoe or something physical. Interesting to consider, and we'll run into this again. Kind of in that same vein, the way she says, "I'm gonna leave," because it is handwritten and not in a proper speech bubble. It signifies this is like a side comment, said under her breath, or even breaking the 4th wall and said directly to us, the reader, rather than to anyone inside. And then last panel, the narrator says the next day, Sarafa returns, sees F66X still talking to herself, and thinks she's still here. And that's the end, but notably doesn't explicitly say so. If we look at the English translated comics, they all have "the end" added to the bottom, presumably because the sensibility of resolution is different between Japan and the West. The Japanese are much more comfortable with lack of resolution, and even lack of like a punchline, so maybe the translators felt adding "the end" was necessary for Western audiences. So here I wanted to get into meta stuff. The traditional joke structure in the West is setup and punchline. Establish a premise, then undermine it in order to surprise the audience and make them laugh. But does this comic follow that structure? Yes, kind of, but the punchline really comes in the 2nd panel. The premise is that Sarafa typically gets clients that are worried or dissatisfied, but F66X's worry is not something worth worrying over. Ha, the premise of Sarafa's character is undermined, she doesn't know what to do. Isn't that surprising and funny? That's so unlike her. Western comic strips we see in the newspaper would end here, but this comic goes on another 2 panels. And actually what we get is a second joke, where another given about Sarafa is that we know she likes to manipulate her clients, but because F66X is so lost in her own world, Sarafa is powerless to influence her. She is undermined again, haha. Look at that bead of sweat signifying her unease, how funny. Sarafa has met her match. And then there's even a mini punchline in the 3rd panel, with the elaborate dummy coming out very suddenly, and there's the physical gag aspect of it looking silly. And so, having multiple punchlines, and soft punchlines for that matter, throughout the comic is more demonstrative of the Japanese style than the Western style. In the West, jokes often all build up to the climax, to big laughs, whereas in Japanese jokes, it's more on the journey, and we get more smiles rather than laughs. Also, with Japanese comics, they will cram each panel with little smile-inducing bits. We'll see more of that in the future, too. Alright, but I think that will do it for the first video of this series. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again. Take care.